Time again, that time when we take a seat at the virtual bar on our very best behavior this time around, because we're going to begin having a chat with our County Sheriff Bob Norris. I'm joined today by Greg and Ken, and I'm your host Chris, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar. Yeah, Greg, you got to put all your drugs and paraphernalia away.
Yeah, I hid
today,
most
okay?
of it. Didn't bring a lot of it in here.
You hid most of it? That's good, because, I mean, if you have the sheriff coming, you want to hide most of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Having
words are important.
some semblance of purity here.
Proverbs 21:15, when justice is done, it is a joy to the righteous, but a terror to evildoers.
Ooh. Dun, dun, dun.
That should be the motto of all law enforcement right there.
I like it.
Yeah, that's good, man. Terror to evildoers. There's plenty of them, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys subscribe to Twitter? Do you guys get Twitter at all?
Mm-mm.
I'm starting to, yes.
So the uncensored nature of Twitter puts things into it that you would not normally see on Instagram or Facebook. And some of the things that I have seen on there, particularly as it pertains to people just being violent to one another, is astonishing. Like, the level of hatred and violence that people have towards one another right now is off the charts, man. I just can't even believe it sometimes.
And that's international. That's not here.
Well,
Only.
it is international. I mean, a lot of it, what you see here is that. Also, a lot of it is like the immigrants in Norway and France, because apparently there is a lot of like protesting and violence happening with all that going on over there. And these guys are just off the hook violent.
Yeah.
I was watching one. There was these immigrants from someplace, and there was a young lady walking down the street with her friends. And he came up and hit on her, and when she didn't want to have anything to do with him, he just punched her square in the face. And then they filmed the whole thing, and we're just laughing about it. And I'm thinking to myself, what would happen if that happened at Super One in Athol? What would happen if some illegal immigrant just decided to punch some girl in the face? Like, what would happen?
I'm thinking we're going to have a different outcome.
I think you're right.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think that if Europe would arm its citizenry, they would have a lot less of these problems, actually. But, that's just me. That's just me. Oh, by the way, we have a disclaimer. Ken, you're going to do the disclaimer for us?
All right. Athol Baptist Church is non-political, non-partisan, and we do not support or endorse any particular political candidates. Interviews of political candidates on this podcast are provided solely for the benefit of our community to make better informed voting decisions. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Athol Baptist Church.
But they can.
They can.
Not necessarily.
But not
they might.
necessarily, but they might.
Two things can be true at the same time.
Two things.
I'm speaking for
Multiple-
Greg. I like you, Bob.
Multiple things can be true at one time. That's a fact. Yeah, so we ended up having to put that on there because people were asking if some of the candidates that we were interviewing, we supported them. And
We're
so
biased.
Or we were biased, right?
We're more opportunist than we are biased.
Yeah,
more
that's-
realists than biased.
We're, opportunists. Yeah, we're kind of like vultures in that regard. Or buzzards, maybe.
We'll take whatever is too slow to escape.
Oh, what about
We'll
Bob?
take whatever's too slow to escape. So what's that say about Bob?
Y'all are equal opportunity opportunists. That's what you are.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's good news. According to most sources, Idaho and Kootenai County in particular are among the safest places in the U.S. to live. So if you are within the sound of this podcast, you are very fortunate to live in an extremely safe county and an extremely safe state. But that's partly due to demographics, but it's also due to the diligent efforts of our excellent law enforcement officers that we have here in our county and here in our area in general. We last met with Sheriff Norris back in November 2022, and you had just been in office for about a year at the time. You now have 1 year left in this term, and you're going to be seeking re-election in May in the primary election. So back in November, we talked about some of the programs your office conducts, like safety resource officers in schools. We talked quite a bit about active shooters. In fact, did the conversation with Nick, what's his last name? Nick
Franson.
Franson.
Yes,
Franson.
yes, Franson.
Deputy Franson.
Did that come about after that? Because we had a conversation with him about school shootings too, didn't we?
Before or after that?
I'm not.
I don't recall.
Sure.
Right around the same time.
Both of those were excellent interviews, by the way. You should go back into our archives and look those up. And both Sheriff and Nick, they had some really great insight into all of that. So good stuff. We talked about civil unrest and what was going on in the world. We talked a lot about increased criminal activity following the pandemic, legislation on marijuana, which seemed to be a hot button topic at the time. And we talked about budget, staffing, jail capacity, some of the challenges that have been faced that he was going into. But now you're getting to the end of your first term, and so how would you say the last few years have been for the sheriff's department?
Outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, crime is down. Have a little bit of a concern with our property crime, but as you can see with the statistics in front of you, crime is down across the board. We have an area that a little bit of an increase that has to do with a particular event. It was a sexual assault that involved a group of teenage kids and some recently turned adult kids from the same school that got together.
And that's why the rape number is so high, because it shows a 70% increase in rape.
Correct.
Yeah, and that was 10 in 2022 to 17 in 2023. So 7 people brought it up 70%.
Correct.
That's pretty good stats, actually, even considering. But so that was all kind of a related issue. They were all kind of in this kind of thing together, and it just kind of all piled at one time. Now, these are not charged crimes. These are arrested.
These are reported crimes.
Reported.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
reported. So they've just been potentially arrested, but they haven't been actually convicted.
Correct.
These are charged crimes?
No, reported.
So they're just reported.
Reported.
Okay,
Yep.
so these have nothing to do with them being actually charged with a crime.
Correct.
Just what actually came in.
Do you have the stats for those that have been charged?
We do.
It would take years.
Didn't bring those with us, but generally, if a person is arrested, generally there's going to be a charge. But what we call a whodunit, if there's a whodunit theft that occurred, and there's no workable information such as video or license plate and what have you, and we check the neighbors' cameras, we check everything that's possible. Generally, we'll inactivate that unless somebody comes forward and says, hey, you know what, we have some information that we'd like to tell you about this particular event. But we have our personnel that are checking the neighbors, talking to the neighbors, hey, did you see anything suspicious on such and such date, such and such time? But generally, if it's inactivated, we reopen it if there's new information.
Okay.
Interesting.
Is this data that we're looking at here, is this available to the public?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So just go on the website.
Yep.
And
Yeah, there's some interesting statistics actually on here. Like why is it that we have zero commercial robbery? Is that just not a thing, or just like nobody reports it, or like
we're a Second Amendment state and you got a Second Amendment sheriff and we got a Second Amendment county? So
that's a good answer.
I sure hope that these
mess around
these
and find out.
Think
right?
twice about this stuff.
Yeah. That's
how would you define a commercial robbery for our
a
listeners?
robbery when an individual walks into could be a market, could be a business, and over force or fear demands property.
So if you live in Kootenai County, you are a business owner that owns a storefront, you can feel pretty darn safe.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
that's pretty amazing.
We don't have the street crime like Spokane does. The likelihood of an individual walking out to their vehicle and getting robbed, where an individual says, "Hey, either I have a gun," simulates a gun, and says, "Give me your money," are low. I mean, it nil, does not happen. But you go to Spokane, and it's a different story. So,
quite a bit different,
significantly different.
Yeah.
How much of that do you think is demographics, and how much of that do you think is just the area's general take on Second Amendment carry?
Well, I think that the Second Amendment has a lot to do with it, but I also think what's going on in the state of Washington with the decriminalization of many crimes, the decriminalization of substance abuse, because methamphetamine, heroin, they don't arrest on that in the state of Washington anymore. So I believe that has something to do with it. I believe that our marijuana is a different marijuana than what we saw 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And this synthetic engineering of today's marijuana is 10, 15 times stronger than it was 20 years ago.
Oh, missed out on that, didn't I?
Yeah. I was going to say, gosh, I could have bought a lot less when I was younger.
Life would have been a lot cheaper then.
Yeah. Dadgummit. Where'd all the synthetic pot go? I was young. Good grief. No, the other thing that I noticed too that is up substantially, and it's a large percentage, but it's only like from 1 in 1 year to 7 in the next, which means it's like a 600% increase, right? But mail tampering, and I'm actually seeing a lot of this in like Facebook groups and stuff. People talking about how their mailboxes are getting robbed and stuff, and maybe they don't report it, but it's happening.
Oh yeah.
So what is that? That must be coming from Spokane, because I can't imagine a scenario where people in our community are actually robbing each other's mail.
Probably a mix from Spokane and right here in Kootenai County. And we classify that as a property crime. And that certainly is something on our radar, because we're going to continue to have those things.
Now, is it true coming out of a mailbox? Does that make it a federal crime?
It does.
Wow.
Yeah. But, our federal government, they don't really focus on the bad guys committing federal crimes. They try to get the good guys to be criminalized.
I was informed early on in my life that, blowing up mailboxes was a federal crime.
Yeah, I would probably discourage that. I probably wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah. When I found that out, I quit doing that. I started blowing up other things.
So mailbox bashing, federal crime?
Absolutely, yeah. We could go into some post offices and there might be a bulletin with your face on it.
It could be.
Probably.
I'd be 13 years old, but...
Have you looked in the Carywood post office lately?
No.
No?
No.
Yeah, I
But
imagine
we don't have one in Carywood anymore.
you guys lost it.
We lost it.
Oh, that's too bad.
We kept our addresses, but we pick our mail up in Athol now.
Mail tampering. Another one that was interesting to me that I saw that was slightly increased was the CPOR NCOV violations. What is that?
My goodness. I'm going to have to borrow one of those then. And where are you?
6 down on the second offense.
CPOR/NCOV violations.
I am going to have to get back to you on that, because that could be a protection order violation.
Oh yeah, like
what
a
I'm- is
like
what
a like a
Domestic violence or neighborly issue, that kind of thing is what that comes up.
I don't know how you keep track of all the acronyms, honestly. It's like the military. It's like there's like a 50 million
Yeah, no contact order violation.
no contact order.
So that's going to be likely a court order by a judge between neighbors.
Oh, so like if you have like a what do you call it? Where you get a restraining order?
Correct. Yep.
Got it. Okay. And then the other one was harassment and intimidation. So what is intimidation? Because it's up like 48%.
Very, very similar. There are laws here regarding stalking, regarding harassment. And so that's also seen to be probably has a nexus to political activity. Whenever we have a political season approaching, that seems
gotcha.
to increase.
Like people intimidating each other about their political views or...
Correct.
Yeah. Is that just like there has to be more to it than a verbal thing. It has to be like a threat almost.
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Just trying to see what we can get away with here. Like what are our parameters of what we're allowed.
Rules of engagement.
Yeah.
For an
Rules
election
of
year.
engagement. And then, so you guys definitely have challenges that you really want to kind of address. I mean, nothing's like really out of hand, but some of it has gone up, like sex offender violations, sex offense stuff. Actually, I think most people would be shocked to know how many registered sex offenders we have in this area. There's a lot of them.
There is.
There's really a lot of them. If you are a ministry leader or a church leader, you should be looking at that list on a regular basis. Yeah. So you guys definitely have challenges that you've got to work on as far as those kind of things are concerned. And I'm sure you guys have got a kind of a plan worked out to work through those issues.
Well, with growth comes crime.
Yeah.
And the more people that move into our community, the more crime we're going to have. Currently, I should be at about 361 prisoners, and I run generally at about a 510.
Wow.
And it's with crime comes growth. If you want to slow the crime, then slow the growth. It's a pretty simple formula.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of our city councils and politicians don't understand that formula.
Yeah. And then they want to exponentially generate this growth by building houses and apartments and all this other kind of stuff, but they don't want to invest in the infrastructure that it's going to take to be able to maintain all of that.
Whether it's schools, whether it's our medical facilities, whether it's our jails, social services. Yeah, they don't want to invest in that.
And they,
in general.
legislature.
Well,
legislature,
city council,
councils.
county commissioner.
Yep.
Yeah, there is so much growth happening in the post-fall area. We were driving through there. Well, even in Rathdrum, like if you go down the back way to Rathdrum and you're coming into Rathdrum and you look over to the right, there's that Viking development subdivision. And just like 2 years ago, there was like one house in there. And it's like, there's like 40 houses in there now. It's like, and these aren't like joke houses. These are like 2-story, like, nice 4,000 square foot homes, man.
And what about the 90 westbound as you approach state line?
Oh, yeah.
You've got these apartment complexes that are popping up everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, even just coming down, going south towards the interstate, coming down through Post Falls, just apartments.
Yeah.
Just everywhere.
Fields of them.
Yeah. It's like, where are all these people coming from? And where are they working?
Had the farmers only knew what seed could they plant to grow that stuff?
Yeah. Concrete seeds? Is that a thing? Well, that's probably a conversation for another day, but
hay, hay grows, but boy, where do you get those concrete seeds and apartment seeds?
I don't know that they sell them at the farmer's market.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they don't.
Yeah. Probably not.
Those are done in the back rooms in some of our larger establishments here in Kootenai County.
They buy the concrete seeds.
Yeah.
We'll get calls on this one, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, yeah, but here's the thing, right? Most people are opposed to the growth. I don't know that I have met anyone that is super excited about the level of growth that we have.
I've never met anybody that says, we need more apartment complexes
Yeah.
around here.
They're
I haven't met him yet.
no, they're not there.
I do remember a conversation that you and I had quite a few years ago with they wanted to put across from Silverwood. It was a huge amount, like 300 homes, something like that. It was quite a few years ago.
Yeah, like some
And-
subdivision,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. And it came down to, we were opposed, but at the same time, we were thinking, man, think of the number of people that we could witness to
Yeah.
with that kind of influx of people into the area.
Yeah.
The unfortunate part was that it was low income. And so that would bring, again, the crime.
It works out for us in some ways.
Yeah.
But we're like all businesses. It only works out for us to a certain degree before you just have to start expanding to compensate for the growth, which is kind of where we're at now. We're kind of bouncing along that ceiling, and you either have to build to grow or you just have to be content with where you are and just tell everybody you got to go somewhere else. That's kind of where you're at,
Let's grow responsibly.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we have enough schools, and let's make sure that we have enough jail beds and social services. Let's do it responsibly. I don't think there's many of us, especially elected officials, that don't want responsible growth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in for that conversation.
Yeah. Well, it has to be measured because your services, even like your churches, they need time to be able to compensate for that growth, man. When you are piling up on them the growth that you're having, if you're not a church that's got, millions of dollars in the bank to just throw up a building, you're going to be left behind.
Well, it's
And
a
so-
chicken and the egg scenario, right? You need the tax revenue and the income from the growth in order to be able to accommodate the growth, which
Mhm.
perpetuates more growth.
Mm-hmm.
It has
then
to be
that-
measured.
And then the people
Yeah.
who are living here already are paying for more people to come because we have an impact fee issue that is not resolved within cities and counties. But we would like to see that the people coming pay for the infrastructure needed for
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Infrastructure
their
impact
arrival,
fee.
not the people who
Yeah.
are already here. You
Yeah.
know, and I think that impact fees should be applied, and I think that they should be a lot more.
Well, and here's the thing, too. Like, I think most people that are moving here would gladly pay an impact fee
Agreed.
to move here.
100%
Yep.
they would.
I mean, all these people that are moving up here, I was getting stories of people that were bidding over market value of houses cash just to get the house.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I have friends who are agents. They were going 100, 150, 200,000 over asking.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are people that will definitely pay an impact fee because
Right.
they want to be here for reasons other than scenic beauty, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
What
The-
we've seen across this country, the weaponization of law enforcement within municipalities, there's a reason why they want to come to the
Yeah.
Kootenai County for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Which is why it's really important to listen to this segue.
Yeah.
Which is why it's really important to elect a sheriff that is going to be for the people, not for the establishment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was a very smooth segue.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It would have been even smoother if I wouldn't have announced it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, can I take you on a little bit of a trip down memory lane?
Yes,
Since
please.
I first took office and right before I took office, and refresh your memory to 2020 when we were having riots all across this country. I had just won the Republican primary, and I get a phone call from the Spokesman's Review, and they said,
That's a really conservative paper, by the way.
Mhm.
Okay, sure, whatever you say. Yeah, they-
You know where liars go, right?
Compared to the LA Times, maybe.
yeah, right. Let's compare it.
I remember the journalist said, "Congratulations, you just won the Republican primary. Can I get your opinion on what has happened in that horrible situation on Sherman with all those citizens coming out and protecting Sherman Avenue?" And I said, well, if it's horrible if you wanted to have property damage, death, injury, and looting. But what I saw on Sherman these last few days, that made that the safest place in America.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Amen.
quoted me on that, safest place in America. And he goes, oh my gosh, I can't believe that a nominee for sheriff would say something like that. And I said, well, why would you say that it's not? And he said, well, I just don't think it should have occurred. And I said, listen, there's a lot of things that I don't think should occur. However, there's a lot of evil in people, and there's evil in this country.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that that was the safest place is because I've been in concerts that have turned into riots. I've been in sports championships that turned into riots. I've been at funerals that turned into riots, and I was in the 1992 riots. And the businesses that decided to protect their business and their way of life and their property with guns didn't have any looting and didn't have any injuries.
Yeah.
That's why it was the safest place in America.
Yeah.
But he was appalled that I would say something like that.
Yeah. Because, obviously it's worse for a citizenry to be armed than to just allow a group of rioters to just come in and steal all of your
Do we remember what
property.
happened in Spokane the few nights before?
Yeah.
The
No
Nike,
kidding.
the
No
Nike
kidding.
store?
Yeah.
No
Yeah,
kidding.
they were looted.
Yeah.
There was
And
fires.
there were reports. I mean, people were reporting that there were people being shipped in for Black Lives Matter. And there was like this, for everybody being as on edge as they were during that time period, man, that went really, really well. I mean, what a example of self-controlled citizenry. I mean, nobody was off the hook. There were some people that were there were trying a little hard, but
They didn't. It was interesting too.
but it was still, really, really well done.
yeah, they didn't have a leader per se. It was just citizens armed themselves, went downtown
To protect their
to
community.
protect their community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. Yeah. I mean, I think there were some guys on Facebook and Instagram that were kind of
Organizing
and
Yeah.
directing people to a degree, to, varied levels of success. But man, overall, that
Yeah.
was
It was
really, really well done,
Mhm.
and an example of how you're definitely not an establishment sheriff, as some people have said that you are an establishment sheriff.
Yeah, I think that my plain speak style is contrary to that.
Yeah.
While I have this opportunity, I get that same comment. And I get that same comment that, oh, you know what? You are a mouthpiece for the chairman of the Republican Party, or you're a mouthpiece for the Hagedorn Corporation, or you're a mouthpiece for North Idaho Republicans, or you're a mouthpiece for this. I have to tell you, and I'll tell you right here, right now, I have never had a conversation on public or internal policy with any of those leaders. Not one. I do have conversations.
So how
with
is it
them,
that
but
you're a
not-
mouthpiece?
But not one. I have not had one conversation, whether it's Mr. Reagan, Mr. Hagedorn, Ms. Patano. Not one time has that conversation ever gravitated to public policy or internal policy. None.
People here have a bad habit of when something doesn't go the way that you think that it should, or doesn't go as far as you think that it should. People have a bad habit here of just labeling people instantaneously. Like we've seen it happen with some of the people that we've had on the show already. It's like you don't go far enough. Now all of a sudden you're a rhino. That was a big one there for a while. It's
Or
like
racist.
every time you turn around. On the left, you had definitely the racist stuff and everything. But on the right, I mean, you had people there. Every time you turned around, you had another Republican person being called a rhino.
Yeah.
Because something didn't go as far as you wanted it to go, or exactly the way that you wanted it to go. And it's like, man, talk to Scott Herndon. He'll tell you. That's probably the most conservative guy I know. And he'll tell you, it's like, it's not as easy as you think to get into the legislature and make change. I mean, you go in there guns a-blazing, trying to move everything to the far right of the spectrum, like overnight, you're going to be sorely disappointed. So it's wild. I don't think I would freak. You're always going to have detractors, and there's always going to be that group of people that are just going to call you names just because.
With that term establishment, let's go into my first term, first day, first 4-year term, first day. Incoming sheriff will not enforce dictates on healthy citizens. Y'all remember that one?
I do remember that. Yeah.
Yep.
It was nice to be able to leave my house without wearing a mask because our governor told us that we should.
And a conversation on recommendations on how many people should be in your home during the holidays. And at one time in Kootenai County, they were not allowing religious gatherings.
Yeah.
And in this press release right here, I said, I, as your sheriff, the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, will never interfere with religious gatherings, period.
Yeah. It's a constitutional right.
Absolutely it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The first one. And so that was on January the 11th. That was my press release. Said we're not going to enforce any unenforceable mandates.
I remember that was part of the conversation when we were talking about opening up, because when it first hit, we closed down for like 30 days, I think. We shut down for 30 days, something like that.
Yeah.
And then we opened up kind of because we were unaware. I mean, for the first little bit, you're just like, well, is this serious? Is this something?
Is this an Ebola type style? Is it going to kill everybody?
Yeah, exactly.
We didn't know.
Then the numbers started coming out, and we were like, wait a minute. I mean, this isn't nearly as bad as people were making it out to be.
And then the municipalities that had the aggressive mandates and vaccines, they didn't have a lower death rate or sick rate than the communities that didn't.
No, not even close.
Yeah. So
didn't work.
Well, it was funny because it's kind of getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but we went over during COVID when everything was everybody was living in freedom here because we had law enforcement that was not going around harassing people because they weren't wearing their mask. But we went over to Spokane Valley to go to Barnes & Noble's because that's one of the things we like to do. We like to go and we like to look at books and see what's out there. And my wife and I, and the lady, we didn't go in with our masks on, and we had kind of made the decision when we left the car. We're like, if they ask us to put our mask on, we're leaving, right? And so we walked in, and sure enough, she stopped us and said, you're going to have to leave, because you're not wearing your mask, or you're going to have to put your mask on. And we're like, okay, well, we're going to leave. And I'm thinking to myself, do they not know that every person in this building is walking around touching every single book that's in this place, and the doorknobs and the doors and the countertops
and their mask
and their mask,
and then they're touching the mask, which contaminates the mask.
A lot of these people are picking their nose before they go in there, and they're not, so it's like
their cell phone.
Yeah.
Because that's always so clean, right? The cell phone.
It's like, what do you think you're accomplishing? It was really just kind of virtue signaling. But anyways, that conversation came up because we were like, well, we can open up, but we were getting reports down in South Idaho even where religious gatherings were being harassed. And we were like, well, we know that the sheriff is not going to come up here and tell us to shut down if we open up. So we were able to open up with pretty fair amount of security. Yeah. Not having to worry about it.
One of the fun sidelines to that is during COVID, our giving went up.
Hey, it did. That? Yeah, it did, actually.
We were like, what?
Yeah, that was pretty bonkers.
This doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Do you know the number one selling alcohol establishment in the state of Idaho during COVID? Super One in Athol, Idaho.
No way.
Yeah, because Athol was up here partying during COVID.
Athol, Idaho was the number one seller of alcohol in the state of Idaho with population of
600
1,000 people.
That's my community right there. Yeah.
So here in that same press release, it says, it is not law enforcement's job to get between you, your health, and your doctor, period. Enforcing criminal sanctions on otherwise law-abiding people go against the fundamental principles of the U.S. and Idaho Constitution.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't sound like an establishment sheriff, does it? Yeah, I mean, so obviously you are a sheriff of the people is kind of the kind of persona you have built for yourself, and fair enough, because you have done quite a bit. Like you entered into the whole library kind of conversation.
What?
Yeah. And I mean, even to the point where you stole some books, right?
Oh, of course. If you want to listen to one side of it,
the book bandit.
yes, Bob the Book Bandit.
Bob the Book Bandit.
I did put that on my plate.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a group of people over here saying, hey, these books are against Idaho law. I had a group of people over here calling these people a liar. That it's false. That doesn't happen. And then I had a lot of volatility in our community over this.
Yeah.
Then I had people getting arrested at these library meetings.
Yeah.
So I put it on my plate to go check it out for myself. And what I found was that there was material that was in violation of Idaho law, Section 18-1515, that if a book contains sexually explicit material, that it's in violation of the law. And I did find that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take the books. A concerned citizen gave me these books. And, of course, I came out publicly and I said that I supported a bill that if it had sexually explicit material, I believe it should be in an area for adults 18 and over.
Right.
I didn't say you couldn't buy it. I didn't say that the bill said you were restricted from purchasing it, that you had to ban it, that you had to burn it. All I said was I supported a bill that if it had sexually explicit material, and we had an opportunity to take a look at this sexually explicit material. And
you brought in a copy of this book.
Would you agree that that goes well beyond sexual reproduction? And
the book is called Deal With It. I'm going to put it out there. It's called Deal With It. It's written by 3 people, and Esther Dill, Heather McDonald, and Rebecca. I'm going to say that's Odom. It's hard to read a little bit on this. But the front of the book says a whole new approach to your body, brain, and life as a girl, GURL, which gives me pause about the literacy of the book in the first place. But, they're trying to be cool because the front of this is definitely marketed to teenagers.
100%.
100%. And it's in the juvenile section in the library.
Youth adult.
Adult.
13 and above.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was reading through some of this material, and I cannot repeat some of the things that are in this book. This is definitely not a sex education book. There have been people that have accused you of coming in and trying to hamper First Amendment rights by speaking out against sexual education books.
That I don't want teenage girls to know where babies came from.
Right.
That was one of the terms.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what I'm reading here, there is no way in HE double hockey sticks, L double hockey sticks, right? that you could read this and logically or reasonably say, this is definitely a sex education book. This is pornography, is what this is.
And the author recommends reading 14 and above. 14 and above, and this absolutely, don't take my word for it. I had a 20-year sex crimes investigator look at this material, and I asked her, in her opinion, based on Idaho law, if this book was given by an adult to a 14-year-old outside of a library, would it be against the law? She said, absolutely it would be.
Yeah.
So this book, given outside the library setting, would be in violation of Idaho law.
Now, I'm gonna take a chance here because I'm gonna read some of this and I'm gonna like censor some of it out as I'm reading it. And so if you are listening to this and you have children in the room, you're gonna either fast forward through this part or go somewhere else in the house. So I just want you to kind of get a feel for how disgusting that this book is. You just saying that it's bad is not even anywhere close to experiencing it. So let me try and read this and I'll censor out a lot of the really bad stuff, right? So the first time I ever went down on a guy, I literally sucked on his blank. He ended up with a huge hickey, and he said it hurt to go pee. With time and experience, I learned that when you suck on a guy, what you actually do is just kind of put his in. Yeah. Well, you get the idea. Yeah. Now, there's nothing sex education about that. It's just pornography. It's just disturbing that this, and what you recommended is like, if we're going to have this material, because we do have a First Amendment, we have freedom of speech. But if you're going to have this type of material out, put it somewhere where an adult has to get it for their child if they want it. Let the parent decide. That's between them and their child and God. That's something they have to determine. But for heaven's sake, don't put it in the children's department where all children have access to it no matter what.
And that's exactly what I said. I supported a bill if it had sexually explicit material in violation of Idaho law. I believe it should be in an area 18 and over.
Yeah, and we should be clear. Like, if you were an aunt or an uncle or a friend and you checked this book out and then you handed it to a young person, like a minor, you would be in violation of this law.
Absolutely.
And you could be prosecuted.
If that book was on your coffee table and a neighbor kid came over and you gave him that book, it would be a violation of law. 100%.
And you could be prosecuted, charged and prosecuted.
Absolutely.
But libraries and schools are exempt from this law.
Correct.
So if you're a librarian, you can actually hand this book to a minor and say, here, you should read this. And you'd be completely okay.
Correct.
Yeah, see, that's messed up.
And they're taking a 1970s law and they are interpreting it as sexual health, reproduction, and sex education. But I believe I have a consensus right here that what you saw is clearly beyond sex education.
Yeah, it's definitely not sex education. Yeah. It's just...
This is not biology.
No, it's not biology. It's sexual eroticism at best. And so, I mean, I appreciate you stepping into that because, I mean, there is a clear violation here. It's not like you're engaging in a First Amendment battle. This is a Idaho state statute. You have a responsibility to look into this because there's potential that crimes are being committed, and it's also creating violence in your community. You had to check into it.
And that's the number one responsibility as an Idaho sheriff is to maintain peace in the county. That's the number one. And I believe I was taking a community-based policing formula, assessing it, evaluating it, and making a recommendation on how to keep peace in our county.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a reasonable recommendation.
Yeah.
Now my taxpayer hat says, why are they even buying this stuff?
Why am I paying for this?
But my sheriff hat, which now I don't have an individual taxpayer hat, I have the sheriff hat 24/7. I believe that it's a reasonable solution. If they have these kinds of books in violation of Idaho law, it being an area 18 and over.
Yeah.
Seemed pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah, for sure.
So has this debate died down? Or is it still raging on?
No, it passed both houses last year. The bill that would do this passed both houses, and it was vetoed by the governor. So, but we're going to do it again. Well, I'm not going to do it, but the legislature is going to present it again, and I will vote again to support the bill that just says if it has this material, it should be in an area 18 and over.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a violation of anybody's rights. I think that's the best compromise that you can come up with. You're protecting the innocence of your children, but also keeping it available, so if you want your kid to have access to this information, then just come to the library with them and check it out.
I mean, if you go to a small market that has these types of materials, they're generally behind the counter, or there's a piece of cardboard in front of it that you can't see it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it seems like it's a pretty reasonable solution.
Yeah, particularly in a public library. I mean, like a Barnes & Nobles, I mean, there's not really much you could do about that. It's a private business. They can do what they want in where they're at. I wonder if that's why we don't have a Barnes & Nobles here. Because how much of their material would have to be
special handling?
That's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Didn't we have a Barnes & Noble?
We did have a bookstore here.
Yeah.
But you couldn't access any information like that in it that I'm aware of. I didn't see anything like that. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it wasn't there. But like you couldn't, as a private business, you couldn't sell this. If a teenager was to come in and buy this from your business.
Yeah, they're not even, they shouldn't be allowed to even go over there and look at it. There's got to be protected by an employee behind the counter or some sort of barrier in front of the book.
Yeah, yeah.
Seems like there's a caution here to parents who take their minor children, especially younger ones, to a school or public library, and just let them wander around, roam, and look at books all on their own while the parent does something else. Watch your kids, because they may have heard about how controversial this book is and may be seeking it out to find out for themselves. Take it over to a reading table and sit there for an hour and consume all of that without you even knowing.
Yeah, yeah.
So, know what your kids are reading.
So then let's fast forward. Do y'all remember one of the first times I got called some really bad names? That was when I put out a press release for our neighbors in Washington to letting them know, if you come over on July 4th, we have certain crimes that we enforce over here. We know they're not enforceable in the state of Washington, but we aggressively enforce them here. Because we have bookings upwards of 50% of all people booked on a July 4th weekend are from our neighbors to Washington. And all I said was, we want your law-abiding citizens to come over here, but if you're going to come over here and commit crimes, we don't want you. We would rather you stay in the state of Washington. And I said, don't come to Kootenai County on vacation and leave on probation. And my goodness, they came after me on that one too.
Yeah.
They said I was a white supremacist, and I go, no, all I said was that 50% of our bookings come from the state of Washington.
Yeah, if you're assuming that all those people are of a certain color, then you're the racist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I said that, in fact, very minute would have a racial.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I just said that you're welcome to come here. We love our law-abiding Washingtonians. But if you come here with the intent to commit a crime, we'd prefer you stay in the state of Washington.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say a large group of people
reasonable.
love Washingtonians coming over here.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know. Maybe that's a smaller percentage that we think, because I don't know if have you ever seen the Farragut boat dock conversations that happen when we have holidays like that? Yeah, people light up Facebook because they are just fed up. They're just like, I can't even get my boat in the water. Blah, 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 blah.
These idiots.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine there's probably deputies dispatched to the boat launches.
I do hang out in Bayview during July 4th, and I have to tell you, there is a divide of how the Idahoans believe Washingtons treat our community when they come over here.
Yeah,
There's a big divide.
Yeah, they're not really crazy about it. That's for sure. I haven't met anybody that is just like, oh man, that's good. I mean, a lot of people from Washington are be coming over. That's great. We can all hang out together and
Need more tourism.
sing Kumbaya. It's like, no, that doesn't happen.
It is. I'm jaded. I'll admit it. Driving down the highway and somebody blows by me, it's rare that it's an Idaho plate. It's usually Washington or California. When I go someplace, Farragut, go play some disc golf or hang out, the majority of the license plates are Washington. I'm thinking, why is that?
Maybe
This is our park. Go to your own. But
They
at
love
the same time,
they love freedom. They
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
the taste and smell of freedom
Yeah.
when they come over here to Idaho.
this is the best place for it.
they can keep it over here, but then vote for all of their liberal stuff
Right.
over in Washington, and they can have the best of both worlds.
I like it. I'm moving to Spokane.
That's actually a pretty good way to, if you're that way,
Sell it that way, huh?
Yeah.
We could sell it that way.
Yeah.
So had a recent press release. So I'll just highlight a little bit of it that last year the Idaho legislature considered giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens, people who have come here illegally. Well, the word on the street is they're going to present that bill again in 2024. So I sent out a press release a few days ago. Will the Idaho legislature enact the highest tax increase in the history of Idaho? And basically what I said was, Sheriff Robert Bob Norris said that rewarding illegal aliens with a driver's license will only encourage more illegal migration into Idaho.
Yeah.
If this bill ever passes into Idaho law, it will be the highest hidden tax increase in our state's history. The Idaho taxpayer will be forced to pay for the tab for more schools, jails, prisons, social services, and medical facilities. In Idaho, county sheriffs issue driver's licenses. I, Sheriff Robert Bob Norris, will not issue a driver's license to any person who entered our country illegally.
Amen.
I'm into that.
That's
Yeah.
pretty reasonable, is that?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's way more than
Straightforward.
reasonable. I think if you want a driver's license and you're in our country, then you should follow the pathway for citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
It's there for all people. Yeah, if you come over, you become a citizen, just like everybody else.
And I'm not saying anything about our legalized migration policy. What I'm saying is if you come here illegally, you shouldn't be able to benefit for people who are trying to do it the legal way and then are punished because people that are walking right across the border are being able to enter and stay in this country where
Yeah.
people are trying to do it legally are staying in their own country.
Well, for heaven's sake, if you went through the process of getting your visa or you came in legally, even if you're not a citizen, that's normal. That's the way that you would interact with people on a normal basis. Like, how do you reward someone for illegal activity? It just doesn't make any sense.
It's just common sense, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, okay, well, the term that you're using, illegal immigrant, doesn't that just say enough?
Common sense has left the building.
It's bonkers,
in
isn't it?
some legislative houses across this country. I think there's like 20 states that allow illegal aliens,
Yeah.
people who have entered this country illegally, to obtain driver's licenses.
Well, Texas is fighting that battle right now on their own borders. I forget where it was at exactly, but the governor called in the National Guard to secure this border crossing to the point where they moved the border patrol out. They were like, "You guys are out of here," and the National Guard came in, and they are actually pushing people back, not letting them in.
It's
crazy.
The amount of criminal enterprises that is being created by these open borders by this president is shameful.
Yeah.
Criminal enterprises such as drug trafficking, such as human trafficking, such as sexual assaults on these groups that are making it their way up here. The criminal enterprises that he has created by this open border is shameful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's no end in sight.
No, there's none.
I felt pretty good when I came in here this morning. I don't feel so good anymore.
I'm glad we could help.
Thanks. But we're a beacon of light up here in North Idaho.
Rejoice in the fact that you have a law, order, and freedom sheriff.
Yes. Amen. Amen. Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah. And then
How you feeling now?
yeah.
Okay. Much better.
And-
I think the coffee kicked in
and-
at the same time.
And truthfully, most of the people that are moving up here because
of the freedoms.
they want to enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy. They want the law and order that we enjoy. They want the American dream is what they want, and you can have it here. That's worth protecting. So yeah, it's scary to think that the federal government may get to a point where they're wanting to ship illegal immigrants up to Spokane or try and put them in here or whatever the case may be. It's like, what do you even do as a county sheriff if the federal government comes in and starts bringing in busloads of illegal immigrants? Is there anything that a county sheriff can do for that?
Well, we have a plan in the event that something like that happens. We have to be very, very cognizant of how this particular presidency and this administration is attacking people that oppose them.
Yeah.
So as a sworn peace officer, because once these illegal aliens come into the United States, the courts have deemed that they have all of the civil rights as an American citizen. So it would be difficult for a peace officer to do something like that. However, have you seen YouTube videos of the community getting together and saying, hey, putting up a blockade and saying, you know what, we don't want you here?
Right.
Yeah, that would be a very effective strategy. But I have done some research on this, and I do have some very credible contacts with Border Patrol, and there is no contract with any company whatsoever to bring illegal aliens from the southern border here to North Idaho. Now, is an NGO, a non-government organization, would they be involved in something like that? They could, but most of them, and in fact, I haven't been able to verify any of the online superstitions that are currently there that we're getting these busloads.
Right.
Haven't been able to confirm it. I can't substantiate it. But do I believe that Spokane is taking some of them? Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all going to trickle over here as well.
Yeah. We are absolutely being impacted by the southern border.
Sure.
100%. That's where most of our fentanyl comes from, which is my number one issue here in Kootenai County. Our fentanyl deaths right now are 3 times what they were 4 years ago.
Gosh.
So,
And climbing.
And climbing. Yeah. It's a cheap drug. It's cheap to manufacture, cheap to transport. So,
and at this point in time, it's not a federal issue.
Well, it's a federal issue. It's not a state issue. We want to get the state legislature to include fentanyl as a trafficking substance. So
right.
Hopefully we can get that done. It seems like it's pretty simple. We'll see.
Yeah, it seems like our state legislature needs to create some ordinances, not only about the fentanyl, but also about illegal immigration as well, so that our law enforcement actually has some actionable ordinances to pursue, even if they're in violation of federal law.
Yep, and I'm having several conversations with legislators on what we can do here locally at the state level to enact some of those laws. To quite honestly, we want people to come here legally.
Yeah.
But if you're here illegally, then we kind of don't want you here.
Yeah.
We're a law and order state.
Yeah.
And we want people who come here legally.
Hey, if you don't respect our country enough to go through the process of becoming a citizen, then you're really not the type of person we're looking for anyways. Really.
Which is quite interesting because most of the people that want to come to the United States realize what a haven it is. And that has been the norm for immigrants for 100 years.
Yeah.
And now it's like, I don't think most of those coming across the border really care about the lifestyle that they're going to be living.
Well,
unfortunately, there's not a lot of assimilation in many communities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no hiding it. Obviously, I grew up in California.
Yeah.
But there are some communities in California where there's no signs in English. All of them are in Spanish or other foreign languages, and we want them to come here and assimilate.
Yeah.
It's definitely something we need to really keep on our radar as community leaders and as citizens. Because I was watching in Germany, there's this town hall, there's town square in Germany, and there were a group of Muslim immigrants that were forcing a group of people that were in that town square to kneel down and pray to Mecca. Literally forcing them by fiat of violence. and there was a reporter there that was recording it. He almost got attacked, but fortunately he had enough guys around him that he didn't. But they had a group of people. They were all kneeling down, and they were forcing them to pray to Mecca. And it's like, guys, that could be us. That could be America.
Mhm.
It probably is in some areas.
Oh, absolutely. And people are coming across our southern border that want to harm us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Oh, there's no telling how many terrorist cells we
Oh.
have in our country right now.
100%. They're just waiting for that FATA
Mhm.
to be issued.
Don't try it here. I don't know if that was a threat or what.
I was like,
Yeah,
okay.
don't try it here. It's not going to turn out the way you think it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's been a lot that you have had to work through, obviously, and a lot that you have done, and I think that a lot of the things that you have done should be enough evidence to support the idea that you're not what people are claiming that you are. I mean, just kind of look at the record, and kind of look at what you've done and who you are, and you're the most public sheriff I think we've ever had.
Yeah.
I mean, you're constantly making public appearances and talking to the public.
Oh, I agree. One of my biggest compliments was from a 93-year-old gentleman was at Nosworthy's. I was coming in, he was walking out, and he goes, "Hey, you're the sheriff, aren't you?" And I go, "Yes, sir, I am." He goes, "You know what?" He goes, "I was born and raised here, and you're the most community-engaged sheriff this county's ever had."
Yeah.
And I am out there in the community. I do want to have the pulse of this community. So I do coffee with the cop. I do breakfast with the sheriff. I do coffee with the sheriff. I do events quite frequently.
And you're constantly having meetings.
Town hall meetings and what have you.
Yep.
Doing silly little podcasts.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that people know the people that they are voting for. And
Yeah.
it's one of the reasons why we have, Heather and Dale and Scott and those guys on, is because, they're legislatures, they're public officials, they're sheriffs, but they're also human beings.
Mhm.
They're people. They bleed, they breathe, and I think we have a tendency to forget that. And so it's important that people understand that. You're a person just like everybody else.
They're neighbors.
And I think
they're
we
next
want
door.
our elected officials to be accessible.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, we don't want them to be in some basement somewhere.
Mhm.
We want them to be accessible to us
Yeah.
out in the community. I belong to community service organizations that I still am involved in that, and I go to many meetings and many forums, and I create my own forums.
Yeah.
Because I want the communication loop feedback on how we're doing out there, how our deputies are doing out there, how I'm doing out there.
So I want to shift gears here real quick because I want to talk about something that that's important to me as far as law enforcement is concerned. I was a chaplain for the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department for a couple of years. And one of the things that I always am concerned about with our law enforcement is their mental health, their spiritual health. It's a tough job, oftentimes thankless, and oftentimes you receive criticism that is not warranted. So how are the deputies doing? How's the department doing? How is the 911 dispatchers doing, emergency dispatchers? What is the kind of general mental health of everyone?
Well, I have to tell you, we have stopped hemorrhaging on our organization. There was a time that we were losing people left and right, 21, 22. But we've stabilized that. Our 911 people are being overworked.
Yeah.
There's been a culture with the Board of County Commissioners, not with the current board, but previous boards, because this problem wasn't 2-4 years in the making. This is a culture that has been not treating the men and women of the sheriff's office very good.
Yeah, and those guys that are down in emergency dispatch, they will put in whatever hours they have to put in if you ask them to, because they care about what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're overworked over there. What we have brought back our chaplain program. It was suspended when I took office, but it is currently back online.
That's good news.
The chaplains are back in in the sheriff cars, back in the patrol cars. They're visiting units of assignments. But I got to tell you that it's the dispatch is a little bit of concerning to me. We're working them really hard.
Yeah.
Probably on average 60, 70 hours a month in overtime.
Yeah.
Their normal 160 hours plus 60, 70, 80 hours a month.
Yeah.
So,
Those guys oftentimes don't get thought about. They're kind of out of sight, out of mind, really. I did try and get in there right before the chaplaincy program fell apart. Well, it kind of fell apart after I left, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall. There were some things going on that I didn't really care for. But anyways, I was trying to get in there and see what I could do in there. And, one of the things that they always told me is they never get closure. They just never get closure. They get on these calls where there's like maybe a kid drowning or something, right? And
right.
They get through all that, and then by the time the deputy gets there or the emergency services get there, then the call ends, and then they never get any closure over that at all. Now, it was getting to where like deputies were calling them and telling them, it's like, hey, look, this is what happened. That was probably a big relief for them. But
yeah, so we've changed that now. So now we have brought in a company that specializes in first responder type of mental health.
Oh, nice.
So whenever we have an incident like that, they are included as part of the after action briefing.
Oh, that's great.
So we've changed all that, and
so this is a paid organization that comes in, and that's amazing.
I have to credit the Board of County Commissioners for signing that contract.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. The chaplains were trying to get in there and do something about that for a while, but see, the thing about chaplains is they're all volunteer, and volunteers are great until they're not.
Right.
It's always better if you can get a paid staff person in there or someone that you're paying to do that job, because it's always going to be their priority. So, man, I'm really glad to hear that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah, they're on board and been for a few months, and it's working out really well.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Those guys really needed that. So, yeah, I always encourage people, if you see a first responder, you see a deputy in a coffee shop or something, buy them a coffee, or, just at least pat them on the shoulder and say thank you for everything you do. It seems like it might be silly, and you might even think that you're inconveniencing them or troubling them. I assure you, you're not.
What you just said, I had a conversation with one of our deputies that was a lateral officer. So he was what we mean by lateral, he was a police officer in another state and came over here.
Right.
So he was from Washington, I think it was.
So he didn't have to do academy and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So he challenged the state. So anyway, he came over here and he goes, I have to tell you, when I'm out here in the field, and there's a lot of people that appreciate us.
Yeah.
Where he moved from the west side of Washington, he never got the accolades from the community.
Yeah.
And feeling appreciated. And it means a lot.
Mm-hmm. It does.
What you just suggested, it does mean a lot. So
helps him to relax.
I would ditto that. If you see a deputy officer out there, just say, hey, you know what? I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Doesn't have to be a long drawn out thing.
Nope.
Just a thank you. And he might even look annoyed when you tell him, because they have annoying jobs, so I wouldn't be surprised if he looked annoyed in some ways, but understand that you're affecting him emotionally in a way that you probably can't even understand. And it's a really big deal. It's a really big deal.
Sometimes we deal with the best people having the worst day of their life, and sometimes we deal with people that are the worst people having the worst day of their life. So, so those words, they do appreciate it.
Good stuff. I think one of the other things that we definitely wanted to talk about as we're kind of wrapping up was budgeting and staffing. Obviously, there are challenges in budgeting because of the growth, but what is it looking like as far as the budget is concerned in Kootenai County Sheriff's Department?
We have closed the gap between a Kootenai County deputy sheriff and a Coeur d'Alene police officer, or a Spokane deputy sheriff or Spokane police officer. There was a time that on day one, a officer that gets hired for one of those other departments are making $20,000+ more
Yeah.
than a Kootenai County deputy sheriff.
Yeah. That was a huge problem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they would come here, we would train them, they would get seasoned after a year or two, and then they'd go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So we have closed the gap, and we have stopped hemorrhaging people. So we are on the road to making gains in our vacancies. And
Yeah.
I'm really happy to report that.
It might be helpful to explain to people how you did that too, because it's interesting how you accomplished that. As far as people being able to look at this as a long-term career, because that was kind of one of the challenges that people would have when they came on here, is they would come into the department with this kind of fervor to do the job, and then they would realize, wow, I could go over to Spokane and in a year be making $20,000, $30,000 more than I'm making here. So then you would end up going over to Spokane. And a lot of the younger guys, you know, they kind of wanted that action as well.
Right.
You know, they kind of wanted that, you know, kind of, you know, I don't want to say that they were wanting the crime, but, you know, you don't want to be a police. You don't get into law enforcement to sit and do paperwork.
Right.
You know, so there was a lot of allure to bring back over there. So what exactly did the department do to enact that?
So what we did was we did a study. We went back like 8 years. And of the 61 officers that we trained during that period of time, 33 left to go to other agencies. So when we put those training costs on top of the training costs of the deputies that we retained, it was costing us $3.5 million. So fortunately, with this particular board, and I'm very, very fortunate to have this particular Board of County Commissioners, they voted in favor of finally bringing common sense, because you either pay now or pay later.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then we have to pay in a different manner with the mental health of our deputies because of the amount of overtime they're going to have to work and what have you, because we're always so short. And so we close that gap, and we have stopped hemorrhaging, and we're on a roadmap to make some gains. So,
and it had something to do with the length of time that it took to gain seniority, right? Or so you go up you go up the pay matrix faster now than you did before.
So we have a 5-year matrix, just like the competitive agencies here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, it was a lot more at one point.
Oh,
yeah.
15.
Yeah.
Wow. 15-year matrix.
Yeah.
But now we're a 5 years. So
So it'd take you 15 years to get to the top tier
step.
of that matrix. I mean, by that time you're like,
You could survive.
Right.
it's like some people would even, I mean, they would be retiring before they made it to the top of the matrix.
You know, I recall when we first moved up here over 40 years ago, teachers were in the same boat. It was easy to be a teacher in North Idaho. You didn't make any money, but as soon as you had, you know, a year, 2 year under your belt, boom, they were gone.
Yeah, they were gone.
We had a high turnover of teachers up here. Basically the same situation.
So we have 205 volunteers. I appreciate the time that you put in as a chaplain for the organization, but as of right now, we have 205 volunteers between our search and rescue, our Office of Emergency Management. I think we have 7 chaplains right now. But yeah, we're well on our way to increasing that program and other volunteer programs. So we've stabilized the department, and we're looking good.
Okay. How many support people do you have for the sheriff's department? People that are paid?
So we have about 180 sworn, and then about 110 that are professional staff.
Okay.
Records, driver's license examiners, control booth operators.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That swearing in is important.
It is important.
It is important. I think people don't really understand what a big deal that is. But I remember when I completed the training for the chaplaincy, when I took it over, and we were standing in that room, and Ben Wolfinger was there, and we had to raise our right hands and take this oath. And the things that were said in that oath, it changes your perspective
I do solemnly swear
Yeah,
to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Idaho.
it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people don't understand that. These guys are they're taking oaths
Absolutely.
to support this community, and it's a big deal.
It is a big
It's
deal.
a big deal.
And I think that there are some police officers, especially during COVID, that didn't understand just what a big deal that oath was.
Yeah.
Because when you take that oath to support the Constitution of the United States,
Mhm.
that means the religious gatherings during COVID time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That means that we are all free to move about as we wish unless we have probable cause that we committed a crime.
Yeah.
And a person walking down the street, a healthy person walking down the street with no mask on, it's not a crime.
There's no crime there. Yeah.
And then, of course, we have red flag laws of the Second Amendment that deprive people of their property when they've not been convicted of anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're spot on. When you take that oath, then you want to make sure that you abide by that oath. You're
Yeah.
not just taking it as a generic statement.
Yeah. It's not just a rite of passage.
Right.
Yeah, it is a rite of passage, but it's way more than that. I mean, you're maybe people have forgotten how important oaths are and
Yeah.
what they mean.
You take a very similar oath when you become a naturalized citizen as well.
You sure do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the people that come across illegally don't take that
Don't
oath.
take that oath, so they don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, based on your last statement, I guess you're not a fan of red flag laws.
No. In fact, I signed a statement. I signed a statement that said, I, as your sheriff, will never enforce any red flag laws. And it's on my website, sheriffnorris.com, and it's still there. And all's what red flag laws do across this country is they criminalize the law-abiding citizen
Yep.
and decriminalize the bad guy.
Yep. And they just give an avenue for vengeful people to get back at one another.
And that's never happened, huh?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's so many things, and so it's always good. I mean, you should know. You should listen to this, and if you're one of our listeners, and just kind of pay attention to what's going on out in the world, and just be thankful for some of the leaders that we have right now. Sheriff Norris and Heather Scott and Scott Herndon and Dale Jenkins. That's not right. Hawkins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dale Hawkins. And so, a lot of these guys that are just out there, they are fighting these battles, and it's difficult, and it's dirty, and it's nasty, and it's rough. But they are out there fighting them. We don't have a lot of guys, especially up here, that are rhinos and are just out for themselves, and we don't have people like that. So pay attention to what's going on.
Every now and then, go to a city council meeting, go to
Mm-hmm.
a board of county commissioner meeting.
Yeah.
Just be engaged.
Yeah, be a part of it. Well, Ken, did you have any other last questions or comments or things that you wanted to bring up?
I'm just glad if you're still listening to this podcast that you stuck with us here to the end, that you consider all of the things that were said here today, that you do additional research if necessary to help you make a wise decision come May, and that you help to keep our North Idaho lifestyle as it is and help improve it.
Yeah. Greg?
I had a thought. Had to leave for a minute. It is pretty idyllic up here in North Idaho.
Yeah.
And you have a family. And how are they faring under everything that you're doing here? And is that something that you would want to talk about?
Oh, yeah. No, we the last election was pretty aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was really aggressive. But no, we're doing great.
Good.
Yeah, we're doing great.
Yeah. We'll keep you in our prayers.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. It can be rough on a family.
Yeah.
Sure can.
Yeah, law enforcement's hard on families already, but being an elected law enforcement officer,
Mm-hmm.
whew,
A lot more
man,
pressure.
doubly hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a fun journey.
Yeah.
For sure. Do you have any last words for us, Sheriff?
You know what? Just want to say thank you very much for this opportunity to come up on your show. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you what you do here, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I would say, just make sure that you go out and you're a part of the process. We encourage everyone to go out and vote, and everyone that we have on here is a means by which we hope to give you all the information that you need in order to make an informed decision. And that's really what we want. We want everyone to make an informed decision. Even if you don't agree with us, I would rather you not agree with me and be informed than just go in and start filling out boxes, not knowing what you're doing. So be an informed voter. It's your responsibility as an American citizen to be an informed voter. So use shows like this to educate yourself. And, if you have things that you don't agree with or that you don't believe, go and find out. I mean, there's no excuse for ignorance in our society today, right? There's all kinds of means by which you can gather information and gather intelligence. And so I would say make sure that you do that. So, Sheriff, thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Really do.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And from us here at Athol Baptist Church and Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar, thank you to all of our deputies, first responders, emergency dispatch callers, all those guys that are out there on the front lines, whether it's a blue line, a yellow line, or a red line, doesn't really matter. If you're on that line, you're doing a service to your community, and we in this county appreciate it. I know that to be true.
Yes.
I know that to be true.
I believe you.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that about does it for today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have an idea for an episode that you would like to hear us investigate, or a guest that you'd like to hear us interview, send us an email to 3p@atholbaptistchurch.org, and we will do our best to try and look into that. And here's the good news. If we use your idea, there is a chance that you could be the proud recipient of the now world-famous and exclusive 3P coffee mug. Yep, you heard it here first. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and share it with your friends and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks again to Athol Baptist Church and its members for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember the Great Commission. Go into all the world, reach the lost with the gospel, and build disciples who could do the same. And with that, we are